Happy Tuesday, May 16th, 2023, and welcome to a brand new edition of what I like to call the Isolation Cabin. I am your host, the vegan you believe in, Kurt Cadet, in the flesh as always. And here on the Isolation Cabin, I like to talk about the different forms isolation takes on, whether positive or negative, the effects it has on us and our mental health, and what we can do to have a better handle and understanding of it so we can have a better quality of our lives going forward. So one thing I've noticed throughout my life that definitely makes us isolated and causes us to be more isolated is not loving ourselves. Not loving yourself can come in many different forms, many different ways, but regardless of which form it comes in, it is definitely something that ruins, not even just throws a monkey wrench, literally ruins our entire lives. When you don't love yourself, it affects the way you look, it affects the way you feel, it affects the kind of relationships you have, and overall, it just damages the relationship that you have with yourself. And if there's one relationship that stands tall above the rest and should stand tall above the rest, it is the relationship that you have with you. And when that relationship is sour, when that relationship is broken and unhealthy, then it's going to trickle down into all other areas of your life. So why don't a lot of people love themselves? And why do a lot of people have a negative and unhealthy relationship with themselves? Well, a big reason why is because of the relationship they have with their parents and also the way they were raised by their parents. While many of us were fortunate enough to be raised by parents who loved, adored us, looked out for us, and always built us up like we were the best thing in the world, there were unfortunately a lot of other people who had the complete opposite experience from the parents who raised them. They constantly grew up with their parents putting their finger in their face, telling them that they're not shit, they'll never amount to shit, they always get everything wrong, they always mess up. And they'll even go as far sometimes as to say that they would have been better off if they never had them in the first place. Fucked up thing to say to your own kid, but some people will actually say stuff like that to them. And when you have the people who should be speaking the most positivity in you doing the complete opposite, it's bound to cause you to feel negative about yourself along the way. Because you think to yourself, if my parents think I'm bad, if my parents think I'm no good, then maybe I am no good. Yeah, when you're exposed to that at an early age and you're brought up to believe that about yourself at such an early age, it's tragic. It is very, very tragic. And then when you grow up to feel that way about yourself, you may do things like act out, not do well in school, get in with the wrong crowd, get into a lot of bad habits. Doing all that shit and having not any proper guidance or having any good relationship with yourself and not knowing better can lead you down a very dark hole, and a dark hole that could take you a long time to climb out of. And in some cases, some people never even climb out of it. When your parents are putting that stuff in your head constantly, it's very hard not to believe it, and it's very hard to get that message out of your head. Because those messages, those kind of messages will follow you for years, One quote I saw a long time ago that really resonated was a quote that said, when you constantly talk down to your kids and speak hate into them, they don't grow up hating you, they grow up hating themselves. And the ways they grow up in hating themselves is by going down a dark path and going down the wrong path and not knowing right from wrong. It's really sad to see. And one way in which that negativity that parents talk down to their kids will trickle down to them and also cause them to not love themselves is for them to constantly always feel guilty. And most of the time, guilty for no reason at all. If there's one thing I can testify to throughout my life is that there have been many a time where I constantly felt guilty and constantly felt bad about myself for the smallest thing or for something that wasn't even a big deal at all. I just couldn't help it. I would constantly dwell on it. I would constantly think about it. And the more I did, the worse off I was. And the worse off my self-esteem was. Yeah. And admittedly, sometimes we screw up. Sometimes we mess up and we get things wrong. But at the end of the day, that's not a reason to beat up on yourself so much and be so hard on yourself to that degree where you literally go as far as to hate yourself. Because constantly beating yourself up and constantly feeling guilty about things you don't need to feel guilty about is one of the biggest forms of self-hate that there is. And yes, a lot of it probably does come from people who raised us and people who talked down to us when we were younger. And in some cases, it may come from maybe a freak accident that happened. It could be a car accident. You could be an athlete and mess up the final shot of the game. It could be losing your wallet, forgetting to pay a bill on time, whatever have you. Sometimes we make mistakes and sometimes we mess up, but to beat yourself up over it and tell yourself you're not shit because of it, if you're doing that to yourself on a regular basis, you really need to take a pause for a second and ask yourself why. Another reason why a lot of people hate themselves and have such a negative relationship with themselves is because of the spouse they either used to be with or maybe are still with now that they should not be with. Unhealthy relationships come in a lot of different shapes and sizes, but one of the worst forms of negative and unhealthy relationships is one where there's abuse involved. And that kind of abuse can be any kind of abuse. It could be physical abuse, it could be verbal abuse. But regardless of what kind it is bound to take a toll on the person receiving that abuse. And the more they receive that abuse and the more they accept it, the more that they'll feel like it's normal and the more that they feel like they might deserve it. And they may think that it's their fault that the other person's acting out the way they are at them and that they are the one responsible for it. And it happens with men and it also happens with women too. It's not something that's gender exclusive, but when you go through that abuse, it definitely teaches you to feel negatively about yourself. And the more you feel that way, the less and less happy you're going to be and the less and less better off in your life you're going to be. And don't nobody want that bullshit. Another way in which we don't love ourselves and we show it on a regular basis is by our lifestyle choices and the way that we carry ourselves. It's clear that when you're going through something and you don't feel good physically or mentally, it's going to show in the way you look and your whole appearance. Whether you don't fix your hair, whether you don't dress at least decently, whether you don't practice proper hygiene or just walk out of the house like you were a human hamper. This isn't a way of judging people for the way they dress or the clothes they choose to wear, but there's a difference between that and where it's clear and it's obvious that you are not doing well and that you are not even trying. You may have various reasons why it's that way, and those reasons might be justifiable, but it doesn't change what the reality is. And when you don't take care of yourself, you don't exercise, you don't eat healthy, you don't have good habits, practice good hygiene, and groom yourself just a little bit, then it's gonna trickle down to other areas of your life. A lot of the reasons why many relationships usually end is because one person simply stops trying. And one of the ways they stop trying is by not loving themselves, not taking care of themselves, throwing in the towel. And that's why I say if you don't have any form of self-love and self-respect, you are not going to have any shot at a healthy relationship with anyone, whether it's family, whether it's friends, significant other. That shit will not happen unless you have peace within you. And how can somebody do a better job at loving themselves and being better to themselves? What kind of ways can they make that happen? Well, one way that started working for me when I turned 13 was exercising. You don't have to be a gym rat. You don't have to do it nonstop. You don't have to be obsessed with it. But just exercising a little bit, a couple times a week, you'll be surprised at the difference it makes in your life. It could be running, it could be yoga, it could be weightlifting, Pilates, hiking, whatever have you. Just moving your body, doing a little bit of exercise here and there. Before you know it, over time, if you do it regularly, you will be surprised at how you feel about yourself. You don't even have to have a six pack. You don't have to be big and muscular. You just have to do it just for the sake of doing it. And once you do it for those reasons, and you focus on those reasons, then all the other stuff will come in time. Yeah, because before I started exercising, I was significantly overweight. I didn't exercise, I didn't socialize, barely went out of the house. And yeah, that lifestyle and that mentality was nowheresville. And thank God I was able to break out of it at an earlier age, because if that shit had followed me up until how old I am now, I would be in a world of trouble. But yeah, when you get into better shape and you just start that path of being better to you, you'll start to have a better handle on your attitude and also whatever negative thoughts may come your way. Because the more time you spend exercising and the less time you spend, thinking about negative stuff and dwelling about negative stuff, the less power that bullshit is going to have over you. And the more time you spend onto something like that where you're bettering yourself and improving the way you look and the way you feel, then you're going to get only more of that. So I highly suggest to go in that direction, because the rewards and the payoffs you get from it will be everlasting. Another way you can practice bettering the relationship you have with yourself is by meditation. Whenever any negative thoughts hit us and whenever we get that feeling of anxiety and worry, we tend to usually give into it and we usually tend to dwell on it. And the more we do that, the worse off we end up feeling, and the more it's going to ruin our day, ruin our mood. And 9 times out of 10, those things we're worrying about and dwelling on aren't things that are worth worrying about and dwelling on. So that's why I say whenever those thoughts come into your mind and they feel overwhelming and they feel like they're getting the better of you, take a pause. Just drop everything, close your eyes, don't think about anything, don't dwell about anything, just sit there and chill. Let go of all the petty shit, let go of all the worthless negative self-talk that your parents or your ex spewed into your head. Do not dwell on any of it. Just sit down, close your eyes, and meditate for as long as you need to. Just simply doing something as small as taking a pause and taking a breather is one of the healthiest things you can do for yourself and one of the best ways to keep the evil and the negativity away. When you let it go, you don't dwell on it, and you just release it, it'll feel so good not to have to carry that extra weight around anymore. You will feel a huge weight, huge burden lifted off of you. And that feeling is one of the greatest feelings of vindication you can ever feel. When something that was meant to destroy you or meant to bring you down doesn't, and you don't allow it to, you gotta give yourself a huge pat on the back once you accomplish that. Because that shit is miraculous. And more than anything, one of the best ways you can better the relationship with you is by talking more positively to you. Because all of us, whether on a small level or a large level, we have that negative voice in our head all the time telling us that we don't have a chance at the job we want to apply for, we don't have a chance with the person that we want to ask out, or we don't have a chance at expanding our business or rekindling a damaged relationship or whatever have you. We have that negative voice in our head that tells us we can't, and also that negative voice that talks down to us, makes us feel bad about ourselves, and gets on our case every time we make a little mistake. But you want to know what something that's so simple to do is just don't talk to yourself like that anymore. And when you feel yourself about to beat up on yourself or talk negatively to yourself, you counter that voice by saying, I am good enough. I can do it. I can accomplish things. I may have messed up. I may have made a mistake, but that doesn't mean I'm a bad person. That doesn't mean I need to beat up on myself for it. Because when you counter those negative voices with positive voices and voices of encouragement, Imagine how much happier you'll be, and also imagine how much more you will get done because of it. Because a lot of the reasons why we don't maybe shoot our shot and go after the things that we want is because we let that negative bullshit voice in our head stop us from it. But if we counter that voice with a positive one and we speak better to ourselves and also be nicer to ourselves, then we will get a lot further in our damn lives and also accomplish a lot more because we feel better about who we are and our damn potential. Yeah, and I know those negative voices can be overwhelming. I know sometimes they can feel like they're true and you can sometimes feel like they're right. But it's up to you on whether or not you give that voice any power over you. Because you could very easily take that power away from that negativity and all those negative things trying to break you down, and you could put it back into your own hands and then see where it takes you in the process. Because you could either give your time and give your energy to that voice in your head saying that you're not good enough, that you're not smart enough, and that you always mess up and you're always a fuck up. Or you can give your time to those voices in your head that say that you're human, you make mistakes. That doesn't mean you shouldn't try. That doesn't mean you aren't good enough. And that doesn't mean that you can't do great things. Because I promise you, if you give more time and energy to those voices as opposed to those negative voices, you'll get a lot further in life. And regardless of how much you accomplish or how much you get done compared to the next person, you will definitely be a lot happier than you would be if you always constantly talk down to yourself. Because the way you talk about yourself and the way you feel about yourself in many ways is what will define the kind of life you have. And if you love yourself both physically, mentally, and emotionally, and you accept yourself for who you are, then whatever good relationships that come along after that will be simply a bonus. But as long as you are good with you, then I mean this when I say this, that's all that matters. Well, that's all the time I have for you guys today. Hope you guys enjoyed this discussion. If you want to talk to me a little more and may possibly be a guest on the show, you can send me a holler at any of my social media pages, whether it's Facebook, LinkedIn, or Instagram. You can follow me on any of them. Look up my first and last name. You can also listen to this podcast on Spotify as well as Spreaker and YouTube. Leave a comment on the episodes and let me know what you like about them, what you don't like about them. And I'm going to be here for weeks, months, and years to come talking about the issue of isolation, the good and bad that come from it, and what we can do to have a better understanding of it and have a better quality of our lives in the future. So for Kurt Cadet, this is another edition of the Isolation Cabin, and I will see you guys next week. May you take care.